Want to say when we talk about writing, we're talking about children's fine motor skills and mark making. We're not talking about children being able to write their name or form letters. So it's that sort of like the dexterity for children and that being confident to pick up a crayon and mark make when we're talking about writing. And we have written our Essex writing pathway to really support actually the development in that area. We can move on to the next slide, please. And this one's giving you that breakdown at a district level, and you will also see in there our statistical neighbours, England and East Region. So 11 of our 12 districts are performing above the England average. Harlow is not. We're just about to launch our sort of Harlow Futures programme as part of the levelling up work. And that's been sort of based on the work that we've done in the island and in the north of the county as well to great success. So this will be sort of like addressing the performance there and thinking about how we can really support everybody in the system and helping the children. And then if you look there, 5 of the 12 districts are also sort of like significantly above those national averages as well and doing very well in those areas. So, you know, its performance is improving, but there is obviously ongoing work to maintain that and further improve it. Can you just have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this slide is just giving you the good level development performance areas based on the different pupil groups and cohorts. And you'll see the majority of those we're doing well, and that we are having success in the interventions. And we've got a real focus on early intervention and prevention for our disadvantaged children and those with sort of additional needs. And the next slide I'm going to talk you through is about the work we're doing about that earlier identification, so we can actually support those children as early as possible to help them make good progress. Thank you. So as I said, this is around a really big focus of the strategy. It's really important to us that we identify these children as early as possible and think about what the interventions we need to put in place. So we've set our system up so we can identify children at the 2-year-old stage. So this is why it's so important that we have a good take up for our funded 2-year-olds, our disadvantaged funded 2-year-olds. Because by having them in our early years settings, we've obviously got access to them. We're able to sort of like put them in line of having the experiences at that quality early learning. But it also means that we can work with the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service. And what we do in that space is to think about the assessments of where those children are, which I'll come on to in a moment. But just to give you the data there on the take-up for the 2-year-old funding for our disadvantaged children, so 20% of the cohort are eligible for a place, and it's an economic criteria. It's based on benefits that families are receiving. We get the data from the Department of Work and Pensions, so we know who the families are. And you'll see there that we've been really positive and successful in getting a good number of those children to have a place, which is really important in this early identification. So you'll see there, we're 12% higher than the national take-up. Of course, we want that to be close to 100%, and we're working on that. But actually, we're consistently sitting in these high percentages now. So it gives us the best opportunity to be able to identify those children. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So why is that important? Well, if they're in an early years setting, as I said, we know that they're experiencing that quality early learning. But it also means we can work with the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service. So HCRG are the contract provider, and we've commissioned them to undertake integrated reviews. So this is a holistic review between health and education, as in our early learning, to really understand where those children are from their development pathways. And it helps us to identify as early as possible those children that need more help. And we're looking, as I said, about the prime areas of learning that I mentioned earlier. And then when we've got that, we can then start to think about the support we put into place and work collaboratively with those parents and any other professionals. So it could be a referral to speech and language therapist. It could be additional interventions that we're putting into the setting. And it could be that the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service are really thinking about supporting the parent and helping them think about the home learning environment and how they help their children to learn. On to the next slide, please. So this is just some data from the contract we have with the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service, just to show you that level of integrated reviews that we're able to undertake for children. So, it's just that backup really, that we know that we're seeing a high number of those children on those integrated reviews. So it means that we can sort of identify them early. We can have the next slide, please. Thank you. And then this slide is showing you that assessment point to who are those children that we've identified that are at risk of not being school ready, not reaching a good level of development by the time they're 5. So remember, this is a 2-year-old assessment, but we're sort of like trying to do that early forecast where we think they're going to need help. And the green line on this graph you'll see is actually after we've identified children as being at risk of not being school ready, there's been an intervention. The lower the bar on the green graph, the better, because that means actually we've got less children that are at risk of not being school ready, which firstly means that more children are ready. So this is just an example of how we're using the data and the monitoring we've got available to us to really get underneath those children and making sure we're reaching them. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. I just wanted to give you some examples of some of the interventions that we offer to the sector. So I've mentioned the writing pathway. Each club is an online access to speech and language therapists, and it's really focusing on children with that sort of the lower level of speech. It really helps our childcare providers to think about how they model speech, the speech opportunities, the early language, rich language environments they can create for the children. And it also is a resource for parents as well. So each of those settings that are accessing this, they can also, there's a voucher system that parents can also access that online help. And the confidence we've seen in our early years providers in just having this intervention and response from speech and language therapists, a lot of it is about reassuring them actually about what they're doing is working and is right, so they're competent to do more of it. We've also rolled out programmes as part of the year of reading and year of maths around making it real and making it real with numbers, which are accredited nationally recognised programmes that really help children to sort of improve their sort of outcomes around children and mathematical development. And we were able to access funding through the year of reading and the year of numbers, and it sort of like was a sort of a great example about working together can make a really big difference. It's gone so well, this training, that we're actually continuing to roll it out. And our internal teams are now being trained so that we've got trainers internally that can continue rolling it out. Early Years Talk Boost is another area. Welcome and Elkland, they're all programmes that have a real focus on that early language development. And you'll see in the pack we provided at the end, I've just provided some summary information on these programmes and what these programmes are intended to do. So that's there for you for information rather than going into the detail of that now. Next slide, please. And we're always wanting to think about that support for parents as well. So we've got our Families Information Service, which is a statutory responsibility for all local authorities. And it says there, it's about signposting parents where they can get information. Talk, Listen, Cuddle is that online resource, and it's full of information on, to remind you about nursery rhymes. I don't know about you, but it's easy to forget the nursery rhymes, isn't it, from your child? So sometimes it's just as simple as, this is the nursery rhymes, this is the words, this is how you can use the nursery rhymes, this is how you can use language when you're out on a walk. So it's really practical, sort of quite basic support, but people get the competence from that. So it's a great resource. So and again, there's some information on that in the pack. So have a look at that, and it'd be great if you could sort of signpost and share that with colleagues as well. Speech Club I've talked about in the previous slide. And the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service is it's a great resource. That's that pre-birth to 19 support that we the Commission as a local authority, and that's got sort of that sort of real mixture of the early learning, family support and health support there. And we sort of liaise really carefully and really closely with them with everything that we do. So if I could just come on to the next slide. This is the final slide for this section, but I just wanted to give you a summary of the action we're taking and our next steps. So some of this I've picked up on already. But we're really thinking about that, drilling down in the good level of development data, so we can really think about the support with our early years settings in our schools, where we know we need to put more support in. Really think about the home learning environment, and it's a universal offer. It's targeting as much as we're putting more intense support into those areas, but it's something that is available as well. Roll out to the Essex Writing Pathway, which I've mentioned. And we're also writing our own sort of leadership offer, so leading stronger settings, because one of the things we have found with the sector, and I think it's, with COVID and all the pressures, their confidence has taken a bit of a bash. We've got some fantastic practitioners out there. And one of the things we've realised that we can do quite simply that makes a really big difference is just reinvest in them, reinforcing them what they know, that, intuitively they know the right things, and give them the confidence to sort of believe in what they're doing. So that's why we've been putting that together. The council levelling up programmes I've talked about. So we're working with a number of schools in the Basildon area, and we're thinking about those bespoke packages of support. Harlow Futures, I mentioned earlier, that's literally just been launched. And we're continuing on the work, the successes we've already had in Canvey and Colchester. Canvey is a really good news story for us. If you think about what the data for Canvey was this time last year, it's the level of improvement there is immense. So it just goes to show with these targeted interventions we can make a difference and we can respond quickly. And then so the assessment, so the reception class support, so helping our reception class teachers and the workforce in there about assessment, so they're understanding the assessment and how they make that work for them. And, we're rolling that out. So obviously the assessments we then get inform everything that we're doing. So this section has been intended to sort of give you the overview of the strategy, quick up to date of years 1 and 2, and then a bit more of a detailed dive into the data and then what we're doing as part of year 3. So I'll pause there for any comments or observations, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Buckley and then Councillor Guglielmi.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I've got a number of questions or observations, if you like. First of all, right at the introduction, Councillor Ball mentioned the years of reading and years of numbers, which, as far as I'm concerned, were excellent initiatives and certainly appear to have functioned. I do recall from discussions in the past that there was to be a year of science, which is a subject which I would personally strongly back being pursued. So my first question is that still going to happen, and if so, when?
You want me to come back? I'll thank you for that, Councillor Buckley. Thank you for your comments around year of reading, year of numbers. I have alluded to that actually we're going to be moving on to what's called the year of opportunity. We're working out what that means, and that's so we've gone reading, maths, and now into actually employment opportunities and opportunities available. So we did consider the year of science. You're quite right. That was probably the logical next step if we were going to do it by subject. But I'll be coming forward with our proposals for what the year of opportunity will mean in the near future. So the answer is no, we're not going to do the year of science.
Right. Okay, well, that's a clear answer, Chairman. May I carry on with the other points? Carolyn mentioned about the 69% or 69 point something percent achievement on the good level of development. And I'd like to know what a good level of development is. Does it link to just the, if you like, the social development? Does it link to the educational development? And whichever it is, how do you measure it?
So the good level of development looks at the prime areas of learning and the learning goals I talked about. And so as part of the curriculum, there are assessment measures so that children are assessed at where they are individually, and then they are marked as either sort of emerging, sort of the categories for them. So it's based on an individual, but it's the curriculum. So they'll be looking at a child's writing, they'll be looking at a child's language and communication, and there's a whole assessment that's done in reception through the year, and they sort of work through the curriculum and make those assessments, and then it's finalised in the summer term to give that end of year outcome. So it's the whole child, it's all of their development.
And may I ask one short last question, Chairman, then I'll be quiet. Towards the end of the report, it mentions about schools needing support, and it particularly mentioned schools in Basildon being identified. And as a local member for that area, I have a particular interest in it. My understanding was that under the last Ofsted inspections, every school in Basildon had achieved a good or better. So why have we got schools in, I was going to say special measures, they're not. Why have we got schools needing special support? Is there an issue? And if so, where is it and what do we do about it?
But it's not quite 100% good or outstanding. Unfortunately, there is one or two that require improvement, but overwhelmingly good or outstanding. But,
and the Ofsted's judgment and the good level of development outcomes are a different measure. So the Ofsted is looking at the leadership, the curriculum, and it's looking at the whole school. What we're looking at here is the individual children's learning, and Basildon's has done really well with their outcomes, but we know we can just do a bit better. So we're just focusing on those schools because we know that we're not being complacent. We want to carry on making that progression. So there's just a couple of schools, and just think about the communities they serve. They just need a little bit more help. So there's nothing wrong. It's just we're going to put a little bit more targeted intervention in for that reason, but different to the Ofsted outcome.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colin, thank you very much for your presentation. We've been very, very busy since the last time you came to the committee. And it's, as Councillor Ball said, loads of information there. The one thing that really is kind of jumped up at me is how gratifying it is to see tendering not been propping up the rest of the district. And in fact, it's 6 above the some of our local authorities and also above England, the Eastern region, which is great. So I've got 4 questions, Chairman. The first one is, what do you attribute the difference between the likes of Brentwood and Uttershurst with Harlow and Basildon and all the rest of them? You know, that's my first question. I'll give you the others afterwards, if that's okay.
Yep. So, I mean, it's just looking at the families, the communities, the level of support. And so when we're looking at identifying the interventions and the support we're putting in, we've got some interventions that we offer to everybody. Very specific to certain areas. So in tendering, for example, we know we will have a high number of our V2 children than we'll have in Uttlesford. And so we know we need to put more support in for those families to help those families with understand how to help their children learn. So the difference is we treat each of the areas sort of quite uniquely. So I think it's hard to compare really, but that's why we look at them, as I said, as a unique district, and we also drill down into the school communities as well. And that's why, as part of Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service, the offer there as well is tailored to the community needs assessments.
Yeah, that's. I thought that
also for the free school meal stat is relevant because obviously there'll be there are free school meals in the more deprived areas and they're not doing as well, unfortunately.
Thank you. My next question is the 4 new posts that you've picked up, which is actually really, really good news, especially with a focus on SEND, which, again, prevention. How sustainable is that going to be? Is it a one-off, or is that hopefully to get ongoing, those 4 posts will remain, and funding, that's all linked together?
So Schools Forum have allowed us to fund these posts out of the early years block.
Okay.
We've got an agreed 3 years of funding from Schools Forum. And the reasons for the post is we were realising that some of the assessments that were coming through for children into our early years inclusion funding panel, some of those assessments for children were saying that these were children with additional needs that actually, when we were looking at the outcomes and the assessments of need was more about transient delays. So some of those children that have missed out on those early sort of language-rich environments, social experiences, caused predominantly through COVID, And so what we don't want is children to be incorrectly identified as needing more support. So that's why we put the posts in. We took the case to the forum, which Councillor Ball was supportive of, and Schools Forum were very supportive of. They've been in post for a year now. They started September last year, so we've just done one academic year. And they're making a really big difference. We're seeing actually that the interventions that they're putting, they're able to go in and do more targeted work and be in settings longer than some of our other teams in the county and across the council. And it's just helping those, this is where we're starting to realise about the competence of the practitioners and reminding them some of the basic knowledge they know is still relevant, and, you know, to go back to that. So we're going back to Schools Forum in November with an update on how the first year's gone. And the hope is that we will be able to continue funding them, but Schools Forum have quite rightly said, we've got this 3 years of funding, show us that they're making a difference and show us that you still need that in 3 years. So hopefully we will have that evidence and we will be able to maintain those posts and maybe even slightly increase them a bit more.
Really good explanation, thank you. The third question is on the service they offer rounds in the early year charter. And what you said about supporting the practitioners for the very reason, the knowledge they have, you know, what practical examples can you give us about how you intend to support the practitioner in the work they already do and do it extremely well? And what were their views on introducing the early year charter?
Okay, so the charter, I've got some statistics later on in the slides and a bit more information on the charter. But the charter's actually gone really well. We launched and had 140 partners sign up. We're sitting at around 160 now. So we want to grow that more. We've been a little bit distracted with the childcare reforms work, which I'll tell you all about a bit in a minute. But I think the important thing is we've maintained that number of partners on the charter. And what it's doing is it's really giving us that insight to what the areas that are difficult, the things that our sector are struggling with, and then we can think about practical support we can put in for them. So, for example, one of the trainings that I said about that sort of, we're writing that Essex leadership support programme, that's come actually from the insight from them and that recognition that the more we invest in them, the more confident they are to the outcomes. We've also been able to test with them some of the pilots, like the speech club I was talking about. We were able to go to charter members and say, we want to test this. Are you happy to work with us? So we've got a group we can go to and just get that insight from them. How we communicate with the sector, they're insightful in telling us, because sometimes we can bombard them with too much information or we don't give them enough. So, you know, that whole sort of like that breadth of opportunities to work with them differently and for them to, they've got a voice with us as well.
That's really good. Okay, thank you. And my last point is you've given us a huge amount of good news of what you've achieved and that. What have the challenges been? And is there anything that you've wished you'd have done differently to achieve a better outcome? It doesn't say as such on there, so I'm hopeful that everything has gone according to plans, but we know that sometimes it's not the case.
I think some of the challenges and things we could have done differently. I'll talk to you a little bit more about when we talk about how we've rolled the childcare reforms out. I think as far as the earlier identification and that work, we've had to get those systems and those processes right. We've had to work really hard with our childcare providers and the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service to get, because early on we were finding that because two-year-olds will have a check, whether it's a health check or an early learning check. We want them to have the joint one, the integrated review I described. What we were finding early on is the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service was so on it and arranging the health checks that children weren't getting their integrated review. So that was probably our biggest challenge. But you'll see from the data now, actually, we've got a really high number of those children, up in the upper 90% of having that integrated review, and we know that's really important. So yes, I mean, I'm presenting to you where we are in the progress we've been, but we've had to work really hard behind the scenes to get that processes, you know, and there's sort of relational capability between all of the agencies as well to work well. So they've been our biggest challenges as far as this goes. I think the strategies really helped us to join up that system working across the partners within the council as well as externally. And there's more work to do with our health partners, but again, that's work in progress. So that join up in the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service gives us that great insight in there as well.
It's fair to say, if I may, that the strategy is enabled, and it says it in the report, to learn as we move along. But, you know, so it's not just, this is a strategy, that's it. It's, oh, okay, how can it be improved upon what we're, you know, the building blocks as we move along.
I'm glad you mentioned the nursery rhymes because that's what my grandson always comes to me. We've found a book at charity shop with nursery rhymes I'd never heard before. Thankfully got a CD attached to it, so I was able to learn something then. So thank you, Captain.
Just on that, if I may, Chair, of the year of reading, we did a bit of a survey on Essex's favourite nursery rhyme, and it was Wind the Bobbin. Wind the Bobbin.
Yeah, that was the most popular one.
That was the most popular one, yeah. And our Talk, Listen, Cuddle resources, we have cards with nursery rhymes on, so we can
Thank you.
have some of that information. And we've got number nursery rhymes as well for year of numbers, so it's
Right.
yeah.
You can share that.
Get some plaques. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor McGarrett.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, there was some really interesting statistics in there. I mean, a couple of questions relating specifically to the statistics and then more general ones. I was quite struck by the difference in the learning development between girls and boys. I wasn't surprised girls were ahead, but I was surprised just how much they were ahead. I just wondered if that's kind of in line with the national picture, or there's something unique to the Essex about how far ahead the girls are. I mean, I suspect over the course of junior school that kind of evens up before the girls then
Rocket ahead again.
go ahead again in later on in senior school. Also, it's just a observation really in terms of the autumn summer thing. I completely agree with the point you made. My eldest was an August birth, and it looked criminal as he went off to school to begin with compared to some. I actually read some research which amazed me, but in hindsight not so much, that it takes till the second year of sixth form for that difference to even out between the youngest and the oldest in the year. But I mean, the good news is I think there's much greater awareness of that now. So you know, there's a lot. I know there's a lot of work going into that. So that's good. But and there's lots of good stuff in here. So you know, it's a scrutiny committee. Sorry, I have to ask the difficult questions. And Councillor Ball, to be fair, did allude to it. The stat that really worries me though is the free school meals one. The underperformance of 26.6%, which is up from 21.9%, which was not great in 2022. So two questions on that. One, do we know why that significant rise has happened? And also, further on in the slides, it shows that we're 4.3% behind the England rate. So, obvious question: what's being done to rectify that? Because my obvious concern of not just me, all of us, I'm sure, is that again, as they go through the school, we know that tends to get worse, not better, if anything. So, you know, do we know why it's got worse and what's happening to turn it around, basically?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to your first point about sort of the girls and boys, yeah, it mirrors the national picture completely, and you're also absolutely right. They catch up. You know, and so I think our early settings in our schools are really conversant with that, and they, you know, think about how, you know, boy wants to learn differently to a girl, and how you set up those learning experiences. So so it's something that's known, and exactly the same. You're completely right what you said about the summer and the autumn born as well. So with the disadvantage, this is why we are taking such a big focus on that 2-year-old identification of need, and it's based on our financially disadvantaged children, those children that are eligible for the funding at 2. And we know that those families need more support, which is why the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service family are part of that. So we believe that the steps we're putting as part of the strategy and that year on year. So you know, remember that the children when we started the strategy that are in reception now were the 2-year-olds. So we will see those improvements come. So we're taking action. I think that's probably all I can sort of really say in this You want to add to that, Shamsa?
Yeah, I just wanted to add also, I think it'd be helpful actually for members in terms of that percentage of those who are eligible to get the 2-year-old provision who don't. We're 86%, 87%, well above the national average, but there's obviously still 14% in there who aren't. Some of those 14% will be the ones who underperform in this 26%. So call to action really for all of us, for those families who are disadvantaged, who can access that funded provision, access it, because all the evidence shows us, one, they're already disadvantaged in life because they're born into poor housing, potentially poor financial circumstances. Then if they don't access that provision, they're further behind by the time they get to 4. And it's almost impossible, the evidence shows, for them to ever catch up. So getting as many 2-year-olds who are eligible for provision, 86% is great, but 90 would be better, 95 would be better, because they're the kids sometimes who end up in this 26%.
Yeah, so kind of leading on from that, and I think Councillor Buckley referenced it as well. Obviously, Basildon related, Councillor Ball won't be surprised. It mentions that there's schools, some schools in Basildon that were identified as needing more support. Would it be possible, I mean, not publicly, but to give us the information on those schools? I think it'd be useful for Basildon members to be aware of that. And also, on from that again, Councillor Ball won't be surprised, or Councillor Buckley for that matter, to, whilst the figures, overall figures for good learning in Basildon were, pretty good, I suspect that disguises certain things as well, because we know certain, like Billericay, no secret, will probably be at the top end. Certain other areas not so good. Again, would it be possible for us to see a breakdown of, a more detailed breakdown? Like I say, I'm not disparaging the overall figures, they're good, but there might be other things going on beneath that. And final point from me, returning to an earlier point about the post to identify children that have been incorrectly identified as having special needs. That's good. No children to be identified having special needs that don't have them. But we also know that there's a problem that emerges often later in young people's school career, being identified as having special needs later on, and often at this early age, it's difficult to identify. Parents might not be aware of it, and also there may be a reluctance of parents' part sometimes to actually acknowledge that their child does have, albeit low-level special needs. So, are these staff also trying to identify where there are special needs that haven't been identified, and if not, what other work is going on to do that? Because this, there's nothing wrong with that, but what we don't want to be doing is missing kids who have got special needs and that only been identified much later, and obviously leading to more problems then.
Yep. So we've got a real focus in early years and that early identification. So where those, so we have our early years inclusion funding panel. So our childcare providers are able to apply to us for additional funding to support those children that have got additional needs, so that enhanced adult-child ratio, so they can really give those children the support they need and get that the right assessment of needs and those early interventions. So so that support is there. And we've got a sort of a wide range of staff and colleagues that help us to do that in the early years sector. But we're focusing on that early intervention and wanting to actually support those children with their needs by making adjustments in the curriculum, in their environments. But we're also seeing for some of the younger children, actually some of it is like environmental, or it's just how the curriculum's set up. So, but it's there, and we do see a number that come through panel that have got funding. And then we're thinking about that transition into school, because the better the transition into school is, then that again reduces the need for those children to have any other interventions later. So we're looking at the whole sort of learning journey. So there's a lot out there to support the sector with that. And we're starting to see, Chairman will be aware of the panel because he used to be our chair, but we are also starting to see actually decline in the return of that financial support, which indicates we're getting the resources and the interventions in place correctly to support the setting to help these children. So, early years is all about early intervention and prevention.
And could you say, I mean, there is an issue of labelling, and that's when they absolutely need to get the right support at the right time. But if you like, label or identify something which actually can be recoverable later on in life.
Yeah.
A child be labelled too early and wrongly has actually a bad effect if we don't get it right at the beginning.
Thank you. We've got Councillor May.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. You mentioned this earlier on, recruitment and retention of qualified staff. Now, it's not always about salaries, you know, we've heard through the grapevine, lots of presentations, problems getting staff and all that. But can we not put in a system where we actually recognise what the staff do? Because what we hear is sometimes, well, I've done this and I don't feel like I'm being recognised for what I'm doing and that. So I think putting in a system where staff are being recognised for what they do, I think could retain people in it and encourage them more.
Yeah, can I pick up with that one? We've got to remember it's in the overwhelming majority of settings, they are private individual businesses. So therefore they, you know, it's not the council to, if you like, recognise the staff, although we do recognise the sector and support and again recognise the excellent work that they do. And as Carolyn said earlier, there are some fantastic practitioners out there. What I would do, and actually, I'll ask that the information we've got be shared. The Poppins bursary, which recognises and trains people into childcare from being childminders through to, you know, obviously practitioners in the settings, has been a great success, and that recognises and gives people qualifications. And the adult community learning who are running that, but part of the levelling up funding, I saw some stats a week or so ago, and I'd like to share those. I'm nodding Jonathan with the committee, because the take up of that has been really, really good. And then people actually moving into jobs as well. Just one example, although it wasn't exactly what we wanted to happen, went through the Poppins, I think it was the boot camp, but then went on to a school as a support within a school. So I didn't move into the early years settings, but even so took that opportunity and progressed and went into employment.
And we've I've got some slides to talk to you about the recruitment campaign and the retention, which really focuses on exactly the points you're making about how we value the workforce, and because pay is a limiting factor, but how do we then make it an attractive career and a positive career choice for people? So I better talk to you a little bit more about some of that later slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
I just said this in the slide.
Bursary is, but you've.
Oh, okay, that's all right. I'll just make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keen to get to that point.
Yes.
It's an important one. Yeah.
Councillor McCrory.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, lots of really positive stuff there, and I'm sure we're all very pleased to see some of the statistics showing improvements. I'm just interested to know how, I mean, there's loads of information, masses of it. I'm just wondering, how do you actually make sure that that reaches all the preschool groups and nurseries which exist all over the county? And I just wonder whether there's any correlation there between those areas that aren't performing so well as to whether they're actually able to access that information, or are they, do we know about them even? Presumably they must be registered somehow. And also, how do we ensure that we gather all the evidence and all the data from those private businesses, as you say? I mean, do we always get 100% take up? I mean, is it a statutory requirement they provide this information? I'm just wondering whether there's any more we can do on that front in those areas not performing quite as well as we would like. Let's put it like that.
Okay, so a couple of points in there. So the first thing, we know every single Ofsted registered childcare provider in Essex. We get monthly lists from Ofsted, so we know where those settings are. We target settings, we look at the data and then we reach out and we target settings to do work with them in the areas we know we need to do more. If a setting chooses to not engage in training or interventions that we want to put on, we are limited in what we can do. However, the majority of settings are quite receptive to wanting to work with us. We also know that some of the challenges around the recruitment, if they haven't got enough staff, them coming out to us for training is difficult. So we've adjusted how we offer them training. So to make everything we're offering more accessible. So we've got online webinars, we can go in and do bespoke in setting. We get settings that come to face. So we try and do like a wide range to meet everyone's needs for accessing that work with us. The data that we get from them, the funded entitlements, almost all of our providers offer the funded entitlements. There's a small number that don't, they've chosen not to, but the majority, very high 90, sort of 97, 98% of our providers offer the funded entitlement. They have to contract with us. So there's a contractual relationship between us and those providers. So that means that they provide us data to get their funding. So we have that relationship with them, which means they have to provide the funding on their 2-year-olds. We know the take up for the disadvantaged 2-year-olds because the parents apply to us for a place. We then pay the childcare provider the funding. So that means that that information is as accurate. It is accurate because it's based on, those children accessing and attending. We try to do different ways of reaching out and engaging. So each quadrant has got quadrant education teams that have got early years professionals in them as well. And so they know their settings, so they have those relationships as well. So I think we can't say that we 100% engage with everybody because some choose not to. If we had a real concern with a setting that's quality was really poor, we would need to go to Ofsted because Ofsted's a regulator. We're not the regulator, we're the advisory body. However, that said, we've got less than 2% of our settings across Essex that are in that category. And we meet regularly with Ofsted. So we would use them to go into those settings. And in that situation, if the quality is such, we can withhold the funded entitlement. So it gives us another way of insisting that that setting works with us. Does that sort of give you some assurance on it?
Yes, it does. As Chairman, if I may, so, I mean, not every child goes to a preschool or nursery, do they? I mean, I suppose we won't know till they actually turn up at their infant school, will we, or junior school.
That can happen, but we have a other, wide range of ways of knowing about where these children are. So the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service, family hubs that I keep mentioning, they're really key to us because most parents will access their health checks for their children. And the data that the family hubs have, there's a family hub for each district under the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service. They have the GP registration. So every child that is registered at a GP in their area are on their system. So we know about them there. And from the GP data registrations, we also know about children, not all children, but if health are known to a child, education is also informed by health. If health have got concerns over a child's ability to access their early learning, they might need extra support. That's done through something called a Section 23 notification. So our data systems allow us to marry up to see whether the children we know about, are they accessing a funded place or not. And as part of our inclusion funding meeting that I was talking about, which is monthly, we have data in that meeting about those children that health have notified us, and we have a look to see whether they're in an early years setting or not. And if they're not, we then look to see whether there's someone else within the council, like our engagement facilitator team, whether they're liaising with those families. So we do everything we can to know about every child. The reality is, of course, we can't 100%, but we can get as close to that as practically possible by working across the system and improving our systems and processes and that data sharing.
Do you feel that there are more children who don't go to preschool or a nursery in, shall we say, the deprived areas? I mean, is there any difference there?
No, so we have between a 93 and a 95% take up funding for 3 and 4 year olds across the county. So the majority of our children. we don't see that necessarily that take up is, or the lack of take up is higher in certain areas. It's fairly consistent, and it's more about children moving in and out.
Yes.
Is where we're not seeing the children. So we have a small percentage that are not accessing. But sometimes that's parental choice as well.
Yeah,
So,
quite so.
yeah, so, and parents are entitled, it's not statutory that
No.
children have to access a funded early learning place. We do everything we can to promote the benefits of that to parents for their children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. Mine's really just a comment really, but thank you for the presentation. I'm really pleased, really key for education. I think this county has done very, very well to increase its targets and bring our children along. Do you think our cashless society, the way we're moving now, is going to have or has a detrimental effect on the kids' number learning as they grow up? Because we all used to, well, I did, we still have piggy banks, we still put money in, and we used to put 1s and 2s and 10s and 50s, whatever, and then we would, you know, add them up when you wanted to take from the post office for your kiddie, and you would add them up with your child, so they got to be a little bit more, less scared of numbers, shall we say, because I think a lot of children and adults can be quite scared of numbers. So do you think they could be an issue later on to say that now we are going for cashless society more and more?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Sorry, it's a bit way off.
But I think this is exactly why year of numbers. Yeah, those are the kinds of elements, weren't they? Why the year of numbers? Because and we also know through the research that was done that led into the year of numbers as adults, and we probably don't declare quite so confidently when we can't read, but we're quite happy to say, "Oh, I don't do maths, I can't get maths," and so straight away we're imparting, aren't we, to other people that it's all right, maths is scary.
Yeah.
So there were some fascinating stats that came out from the research. So year of numbers is exactly about getting underneath that. And the Making It Real Numbers programme that I was talking about, that's what that's about. It's about that numeracy, the curriculum for numeracy, and about how it's really important to help our youngest children to sort of problem solving and maths. The rhyme cards we've produced some new rhyme cards that are very based on number-based nursery rhymes. So we're doing what we can to impart as early as possible that more of a love, shall we say, of numbers than a fear of it. But interesting point about cashless society that not really thought about, but other than to say we are just the pressures.
I think, yeah, I'm actually thinking about it. It's, yeah, the year of numbers is not just about being able to do equations and whatever. It's about managing finances as people move on. Now, there'll always be, okay, whether we move to a completely cashless society or whatever, there'll always be a value to a product. And so it's just giving the ability of, I always give the Jaffa cake example, you know, so it won't be a surprise that I may be partial to the Jaffa cake. But if you see, actually in the supermarket, you have 10s, 20s and 30s, and they're all sort of priced differently, and you know, either per gram or per 100 grams or each. And it's quite interesting what becomes the cheapest per Jaffa cake. And you need to have an element of mathematical know-how to work out what's the better value. I know that's probably a little bit of a trivial example, but even in a cashless society, you want to know how much you're paying for your Jaffa cake.
Can I come back, Chair? Because I think unless the children are encouraged at an early age and get a basic level of numeracy, they never ever learn it later on because they switch off their minds. It's proven their minds just switch off. It's too hard. They can't understand the basic times tables, adding, subtraction, whatever. So they never even get to the equations or further on. So I'll be pleased to know exactly about the numbers because I think it's fascinating, and I think it's a skill set we all need for successful going out through our lives. Thank you. So I said it was only a point, Chairman, really, but it's quite an interesting one.
I'm just a bit worried with all this talk of piggy banks and Jaffa cakes. If you said Snickers bars, I would have understood why I've never done
Embarrassing.
Well, thank you. Just one quick question from me. I mean, I thought the issue of the variance between the different districts was quite interesting. Not surprising necessarily, but quite interesting. Two things really. Is there any? Obviously, deprivation is an issue, but where unemployment is a part of that deprivation, is there any evidence that people are less likely to take up the offer if they're at home because they're unemployed? Is that a factor with this? And of course, with the change that we're seeing with more people working from home, you know, the issue with home education later in the children's educational career. Do you see any change coming about because people are at home, they're more likely to want to keep their children at home? Yeah, traditionally, the sort of post-war issue was that mothers largely were at home, kept their children at home until they started school. And a lot of that early years was then provided within the family. Do you think we're going to drift back to that at all?
I think it's a really interesting point because certainly anecdotally, and I think there might be a little bit of evidence that since the working from home, school attendance has been affected by that, where maybe the battle of getting to work and your child to school, if you're working from home, sometimes you'll say, okay, I'm at home, you know, the sniffles, you can stay with me, as opposed to insisting that the child goes to school. But there's a little bit of evidence, but a bit anecdotal as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because I was going to say the same as you, Constable, that what you were saying about what we're seeing in schools, but we're not actually seeing that in early years. The take up for early years is growing for the 2-year-olds. And there's a demand for places. We're having to create more places. Parents are looking for more places. You know, we've got areas where we haven't quite got enough at the minute. We're working on that. So, and I think that probably comes about because sort of for working parents, having a preschooler at home and trying to work from home is probably quite problematic. It's possibly easier to do. You know, well, we know, don't we, that if you're working from home and your school-age child is not quite right, they can maybe be a little bit quieter indoors with minimal supervision, whereas you can't do that with a 2-year-old in the same way. So, but to base it on the data and the percentages of take-up of children hasn't changed. We're increasing disadvantaged 2-year-olds. 3- and 4-year-olds is quite static at the take-up.
But that in a way, if I may, that ties in with the sort of social deprivation divides that come with it. I remember during lockdown, I had one parent who was ringing me continually, complaining about the fact that the schools were closed. He was a senior partner of a big legal practice in London, working from home. He was being pushed to continue working and had 3 small children in the house. He just wanted to be able to get on with his job. So, you know, but there is maybe a difference there between somebody who's trying to work from home and somebody who hasn't got a job and is at home. So I just wonder if that's something worthy of consideration going forward. Shamson.
I just wanted to add on that point, Chairman. I think there's a really important aspect to this, which is really important for communities and for people, that often early learning and childcare and accessing this is badged as an economic choice for parents, so to allow them to work, to get to places, etc. But the really important message, I think, is it's good for children.
Yes.
You know, sending your children or enrolling your children in early years is not about just you being able to get to work or not having them at home while you're on meetings. It's actually good for them. It's better for them. All the evidence tells you that they will be better into school, etc. So it isn't just because sometimes the media, etc., badge it all about enabling parents to work, but actually there's an element of it's better for children's outcomes and education. And I think that's a message we should all get out there and celebrate.
Thank you. I was concerned because I know that Councillor McGarren has asked for some information around the schools in Bamford, and I wonder if we could share any information we've got with members in Harlow as well, where we've clearly got a problem, because I think it'd be in their interest to be able to promote this at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's been really interesting. Move on with the next phase.
This is a shorter section. And just based on the point we've just been talking about, focusing on working parents, this is exactly what this is about. Could we go to slide 29, please? Thank you. This is the childcare reforms expansion. I just wanted to give you some updates on this and tell you what it is and what we're doing about it. And this is predominantly a focus for support for working parents, and completely agree with everything that Jameson was saying about, you know, early learning with children is really important. And if you think it's not statutory for parents to take their children to early years settings, and we have the high percentage take-ups that we have, I think parents are getting that message about the importance. So lovely, thank you. Okay, so This section is just on the national childcare reforms and the expansion. So just a plot of history there for you of when this was announced and what it's about. So March of last year, there was this announcement sort of package for support for the childcare sector, and as it says there, predominantly focusing on getting parents back into work, but with a real focus on women and thinking about the maternity leave period. And it means that actually, as this rolls out, a bigger percentage of the income that our childcare providers are accessing is through the funded entitlement. So through what we get from central government, and as a local authority, we passport out to the sector. So the first bit about this is around taking the 30 hours funding for 3 and 4 year olds, which is aimed at working parents. The criteria for that is you need to be earning a minimum amount of money and a maximum amount of money if you're a 2-parent family for 2 parents to be working, and to actually lower the age range for that. So we're bringing that down younger, and I'll sort of, it's going to be from 9 months, but it's coming in over a period of time, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. But it's that focus on thinking about maternity leave ends for women predominantly, and so the maternity leave or the paternity leave, and so closing that gap there. We did get a new investment from central government, from the Department for Education, in the funding levels. I've talked to you before about the levels of the 3 and 4 year old funding being problematic for the sector, a national problem. So they have invested some more money, which has closed that gap a bit, but not completely. Big change to how the universal credit was paid. It used to be paid in arrears. So actually, if you are a parent looking to work and you were accessing the universal credit, you had to find the money to pay the childcare and then get paid. So that's a significant financial barrier. So that's now paid in advance. So that's much better, and that was brought in very quickly. Childcare providers consider changing their adult child ratios from 1 to 4 to 1 to 5. Not mandatory, that was a choice for them to make, but the idea was that it was to help them sort of with their income levels. Real focus on incentivising people to become childminders, because we know that's an area we really need to invest in our childcare sector. And really think about wraparound childcare for our working parents. And as part of our childcare sufficiency assessment, the wraparound is the element that we need to do the most work on, and we've got the most gaps. And so that was welcome, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. And just making some adjustments to the early years foundation stage, particularly for childminders, and they're in the process of being rolled out now about how childminders can work, where they can work from. We know some people, their tenants, for example, they have limitations on their tenancy agreements about whether they can actually work as a business from their own home. So it's in response to sort of some support in that area. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So just this slide is intended to just break that down slightly, just into those different categories for you. So as I said, the early years element is being rolled out for the additional 15 hours or up to 30 hours from the in incremental stages. So from April of this year, working parents could access funding for 2-year-olds for 15 hours. So previously it was just our disadvantaged 2-year-olds that could access that funding. So from April, that was rolled out for working parents as well. From this term, we've lowered that down to 1-year-olds. So the criteria is for children from the term after they turn 9 months. So this is a little bit problematic with some of the messaging, because the messaging that's come out from central government says from 9 months. Actually, it's the term afterwards. So we have to be very careful of messaging for parents that they understand, because a child could actually be 13 months before they get into the next term. From September next year, so 2025, from that term after the 9 months, working parents will be able to access up to 30 hours of funded entitlement. So it's sort of broadening the offer across the age range. So they're doing it incrementally to give us the opportunity to, because we need to create more places and expand the places that we have. And on the right of the slide, you'll see there is the funding for the wraparound childcare. And this is at the breakfast club and childcare at the end of the school day as well, either on the school sites or within that community. So it's walking for those children. And this rollout is intended from September 24. up to September 26. I think some parents have thought it was all going to be there from September 24, but this is a sort of an incrementally increasing programme. Prioritising and piloting that support for childminders and incentivising childminders to register. So if you're an individual childminder working yourself, there was a grant of £600, or if you were signing up via a childminder agency, that was a £1,200 allocation, which is still being rolled out. And I've said to you about the universal childcare payments being paid up front rather than in arrears. Move to the next slide, please. And this is intended to be just a pictorial set out of how this is rolled out, just to sort of so you can see it hopefully at a glance. So on the left, you'll see the 3 and 4 year olds. So there's no change for 3 and 4 year olds. The offer stays the same. Working parents already had a 30-hour entitlement, so that doesn't change at all. The age 2s, you'll see there is a change. So we had the blue box at the top with what we already had. The element on the bottom is how we're doing 15 hours from April, and moving up to 30 hours from September. And then the column to the left is that sort of from 9 months, the term after 9 months up to 23 months. 15 hours available from now, and that also increases to the 30 hours from September next year. So just to give you that sort of pictorial sort of diagram, if you like, about how that incrementally increases. I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the DfE allocated funding to local authorities to roll this out. So we had a capital budget of 2.8 million. And we were looking at creating 795 new early years places. So from the, from 9 months upwards, and 1,800 new wraparound childcare places. And we also had a revenue budget for wraparound. And you'll see there we've got the allocation of 6.9 million over those 3 years set out there. And the wraparound is intended to a start-up grant, if you like, to help those wraparound settings to get established and to get going. So we launched the first phase in the summer term, as it says there, and we are looking to create 570 new places with an allocation of 1.4 million. And we're looking at creating 785 places there through the wraparound capital and the 1.2 million of revenue funding. So we're on the journey. We've got lots to do still, but we're on that, that journey, if you like. So we've launched a second phase for this term, and that's out at the moment. And we're working with our schools and our wraparound childcare providers around what that looks like for the school-aged children. And we're obviously working with our early years providers to help them to get ready to apply for the money, the expansion programs, and sort of make it as easy as we possibly can for them to apply. Then just move to the next slide. And this is just a breakdown really of where the funding has been allocated in phase 1. So just to sort of, we've got that breakdown at a district level. You'll see on there we've got some areas where we haven't had, we're not allocating funding at the moment, so we're obviously targeting those areas and working with our childcare providers in those areas to be able to support them or think sort of creatively about what else we can do in that phase 2. And we will continue with rolling this out as long as we have the funding. So we need to sort of, as I said, continue working with the sector and thinking about everything else that we're working on with them. So they were just the slides I wanted to share with you on the childcare reforms, and just to give you the sort of that very high level overview of what it is and what we've been doing. So we'll pause there if that's okay for any observations or questions.
Okay, well, I have one question because, and this comes about looking at the sector itself. Obviously, it's great that there's a general increase in free provision for families. How is the business model of the settings aligning with that? Because if you increase the reduced level of funding that they get from through the free entitlement, they also lose money in terms of the extra hours that they sell to parents, usually at a slightly more premium rate. because it's an agreement between individuals rather than that. I know that a lot of them, a lot of the business model for a lot of the settings suffered quite badly as a result of those changes. How is that playing out in these later iterations?
Definitely.
Okay, so the first thing with the funded entitlements, the hourly rates that we're able to passport out to the sector, and if I could just back up a minute, and just the funding we get from central government is based on a national formula. So we get allocated, every local authority has a slightly different funding formula and a cost per place, and it's based on the demographics. So we're limited on what we can pay out to the sector. But we do pride ourselves as Schools Forum that local authorities are able to retain up to 5% of that funding for our internal costs. But Essex actually passports almost all of that money out to the sector. So the money we get in, we're putting as much of the money out. With the expansion around the funded rates, the lower age group hourly rates are much more akin to the costs actually for our childcare providers. So where we talked to you before about the pressures for 3 and 4-year-old funding, there being that gap between the cost of the provider running the place and the money we're able to pay them, that doesn't present itself in the same way in the younger age group. So the funding we've got is more akin, as I said, to those hourly rates. So for the younger elements is not as big an impact as we had. But also as part of the team, we've got business management consultant team that are also working with the sector and helping them think about their business models and about how they can make those adjustments. Because expansion in itself can be quite destabilising for any business, can't it? So we need to be putting that insight and support into the sector in that way. We've also changed or offered the how we pay the funded entitlements to the providers. We did a survey on whether they wanted us to carry on paying them on the twice termly process that we've always done, or whether any of the sector wanted us to move monthly. So we're helping with the cash flow, particularly when they would have been getting income in from their parents on a monthly basis. And as part of the outcome of that, day nurseries and childminders opted to be paid monthly, maintain nursery school run provision, and preschools opted to carry on in the current cycle. So, but we've given them the opportunities to look at having that paid differently. And so I think the biggest problem is that worry of the 3 and 4-year-olds still is not that. So that is where the financial pressure still remains in the sector, even though we had that uplift from the Department for Education as part of the childcare reforms announcements. So again, we are working on them. The part of the sector that is most affected by this is childminders, because there's a different hourly rate depending on the age ranges. So as a childminder, you could have 3 preschool age children. So if you had, say you had a 1-year-old, we're paying you £10.73 as the hourly rate, which is going to be around what you're charging, possibly slightly higher in some cases. And you've got a 2-year-old, which we're going to be paying you £7.85 for. And then you've got a 3 or a 4-year-old, which we're paying £5.23. If you constantly have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and you've got the rolling, you keep your income levels up. If you have 3 2-year-olds, your income levels go down. So we are feeding this back to the DfE. This is a real pressure for the childminding sector. And so we don't know what the answers to it are yet, other than the fact we are feeding that back into the DfE as a pressure. And because more children, up to 80% of an income from childcare providers, including childminders on average, is going to be through the funding entitlements, that will have a big impact on the childminders. So we really need to think about how we can support them and be feeding that cost pressure back. So that's where the biggest pressure with the rollout of the childcare reforms is.
Thank you. That's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of detail in your answer there. I was struck by one point that you made around the growth in the sector, and if a setting is growing, they could easily get into the situation of over trading. Having more doesn't necessarily mean that you are more financially sustainable. And I suppose that the sustainability of the sector is the most important part, to make sure that people are not going broke and not able to continue.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. I can see that's an ongoing challenge.
Would you like me to tell you a bit more about how we help with sustainability? Because it is a worry, and big sector. We've got lots of providers. We've got around about 1,500 childcare providers across Essex, including childminders, so it's a lot to offer support to. But that's exactly what our business management consultants role is about. They do surgeries, offering support. If people are applying to us for funding for expansion, we are looking. Some of our childcare providers don't understand why we want to see business plans and cash flow forecasts. I'm an existing business. Why are you asking me? But we are asking because we want to know. We want to help them to ensure that actually expansion and growth is right for them. We want the places, but equally we want them to be sustainable. So there's a lot of support that we do put in that area.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, a lot of people who go into it are there to because they're interested in what they're doing, but the lack of business understanding. I remember having a lady come and ask me about setting up something, and the only advice I could give her from a business point of view was don't. It's Councillor Guglielmo.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It's very much in line with what the chairman's pointed out. It's the affordability and the disparity that exists for childminder, lack of incentive, if you like, for childminders. I'm aware of quite a few that have given it up because it's not, you know, they're not really, it was costing them, basically. I'm more interested to understand how you're tackling, as you know, I don't want to go native, because my area, and that, you know, but there is a distinct lack of school earlier places where considerable level of housing has taken place. And, you know, my question to you is, how do you address that? Because obviously you cannot magic earlier places unless you've got settings and unless you've got things. So I'd just like to understand what your, how you're addressing and tackling that.
Yes, sorry.
Our childcare sufficiency assessments are really important because we need to know all the time what we've got, whether we've got surplus or deficit number of places. So we're constantly looking at the childcare sufficiency position. We do a monthly review of like a rolling place data. So we're looking at where places are closing, where new places are opening. So we've got a constant live snapshot all of the time. And we've also got a forecasting tool which sits alongside that, which is similar lines of what you would see from a school planning point of view. Places a little harder to do with early years because it's not statutory, and an early years place could have as many as 3 children in it because children don't tend to attend their early years place full time. But it's mirrored on the school place forecasting tool, and we've made those adjustments with our insight teams. And then what we do is we use that insight when we know we've got the new housing developments. We've got that live position of the assessment of need to say, actually, that housing estate is going to generate a need for an extra 50 places. And so we would then be saying, so that means that we're going to need from the developer X Section 106 capital investment, which we get in. And then we have that rolling programme of so every term, and I've got some data which I'll tell you in the next section about where we are this term, what we're going to be advertising from a Section 106 point of view, and what the numbers look like. I think the pressures we have with the Section 106 funding is the houses, the agreements we have with the developers is when they pay us the money, because obviously they've that big outlay investment, haven't they? And then there will be triggers of X number of dwellings being sold and they will pay us. We can't actually move to be spending that money, so we've got it. So sometimes we do have that lag, and that's really frustrating. We had the really innovative model where we had a developer build the nursery for us actually rather than give us money. So we are exploring those different options about what that Section 106 agreement looks like. So if a builder can build us a nursery, it helps the builder because if they're building family homes and there's childcare on site, obviously it goes together. So that's how we're managing it, but there is a lag sometimes, as I said, for that reason, which is a system issue that is something we can't really resolve unless we can find the innovative ways and talk more to those housing developers about they build the nursery for us, but we.
Yeah, which brings, it goes into that, it's a commercial venture at the end of the day, isn't it? Someone chooses, you could see that there is a housing development being done, 500 houses, not only is, provisions there, so someone with a bit of a business enterprise would go and provide the 52 places. And if that's the case, what kind of support can you give to the private sector then? Is there a mechanism that you can help?
So what, for starting up?
Yeah.
So there's a whole raft of things that we're offering. So we have a rolling support from our business management consultants that I was talking about. We have those local teams, so they'll know about so the sufficiency needs in the area. We talk to our property colleagues and Lambert Smith Hampton as our commissioned agent that we work with as well about there's premises that we know that are available that could be approached. So it's bespoke, the support, because it depends on what comes in, but we will always try and help an interested party to be setting up. We've got the Section 106 opportunities. There's a lot of like surgery kind of support to help them understand what they should be considering. We've got a suite of templates that they can be using from a business modelling point of view. And then the other thing we have is lease opportunities. And the 2 new schools that were opened this term, both of those have had nurseries built at the same time. And we were able to offer lease opportunities. In those particular instances, actually, the academy are running the nursery. So they are our first 2 examples, aren't they, of that through school from birth up to the end of the primary phase. So all in one place. So, but we also know from the early years sector, they respond really well to lease opportunities. I think they find that easier to access. Because obviously we're expecting a lot of them, aren't we, to undertake capital programmes when they're early years professionals.
It's called sustainable planning. One last question, Chairman. How do you address places that have closed down for whatever reason? I'm aware of one in Brentwood that was then it just went to pots. That's 52 places and it's still sitting empty there. How do you address that?
So it will depend when we know about it. So there's the earlier we know, we've got more chance to. So it might be that a childcare provider, we can put the financial business management advice in and they can help turn their business around. We could help them maybe identify an alternative provider to go into that space. If we hear at the last minute, it's a bit limited what we can do. If we have a childcare provider that has exited a building that's an ECC building or it's one of our local councils, we will then ourselves, we would advertise that as a lease opportunity. Or if it's one of our local councils, my team have got really good relationships with their counterparts. So if we can, we'll be saying, actually, can we help you to advertise this and get a new childcare provider in? I mean, the difficulty, of course, is there's a time lag. It takes time, doesn't it, to an opportunity. But we've got tried and tested processes to be able to do that and offer it quite quickly. But the process in itself, to be fair to people to have the opportunity to apply for it. The other thing that the team also do, sometimes we need to give advice to help a setting to close down well. That feels counterproductive, but if they are trading at a loss, then we have to help them. And if they're a charity, they need to close down well because otherwise they have some financial liabilities. But then again, if we've got that, we're in there with them. Sometimes we can find ways of generating interest for other providers to be coming in. So it is different compared to the different circumstances that present themselves.
I was going to put it on CIC, but thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can't see anybody else indicating, so give it to you again.
Final section then. So okay, can we go to slide 36, please? You. The next slide. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of other areas. Some of the challenges, and we've talked a lot about these, but just to sort of recap on them. So the financial pressures that we talked about, are there in the sector, and there's lots that we do. We have a small grant, so we have in some situations we've been able to provide support if there's a short-term cash flow problem. So if they're in an area where it's an area of disadvantage, it's closed, there was no other provision, we have a small grant that we can help in some of those circumstances. It's not, we can't help everybody, there's too many settings, but so we have quite strict criteria. But an example of that was we had a setting that couldn't recruit, and they've got agency staff they'd taken on. And they were really happy with the agency staff, and they wanted to take them on as permanent members of staff because their costs were lower, but they couldn't afford the agency fees for the introduction. So we were able to give them a grant to cover that cost. So that the grants of that kind of thing, one-offs, makes quite a big difference. Recruitment and retention, as we've talked about, is an issue. And we launched our recruitment programme, and I've got a couple of slides to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing there. And as we've talked about the increased number of early years with emerging additional needs requiring more support, but we're just starting to see, we think we're turning the curve on that, and the additional resources that we've got in is making a difference there. And as I said earlier, the focus in early years sector is that early intervention prevention. So actually we get the right level of support in at the right time. And the next slide, please. So we've talked about the recruitment campaign a lot, but we wanted to be really proactive in what we were doing. We recognised that this was an issue. The slide's just gone off. Coming back, thank you. So we wanted to sort of be really proactive and show the sector that we were there looking to support them. So we launched this campaign in October 23, as it says there, and we had three focuses we wanted to do. So we wanted to have that element of it sort of being a sort of something that we're always alert to. We want to be able to start to promote the childcare sector as a good career choice. And back to Councillor May's points earlier, it should be a career choice that you're proud of. You're making a really big difference. We know the wages are not the highest, and there's not much we can do about that. But what we can say to the practitioners is really value what they're doing, really reinforce the difference they're making, and really think about how the work environment for them can be really conducive to them and their family life. And that's what the second point was about. We know we lost a lot of experienced practitioners during COVID for a number of reasons. Some just had been in the business a long time and it was a time for them to retire. We know others could go out into other roles and earn more money than they could earn in the early years sector. So what we've been doing is really targeting those that have left, in the hope that maybe they've left and gone somewhere else and they're not they haven't got that job satisfaction that they had before. How can we encourage them back in? What can we put into place for them? And the Poppins bursary that Councillor Ball mentioned earlier was partly born out of that as well. So if we want to bring them back, how can we quickly provide them with the training or the refresher training on sort of the key elements of that first aid, paediatrics, first aid and safeguarding training and that kind of thing. And we know we want to do more to support our childminders, so there was a real focus in this as well on our childminders and how we supported them. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we're in the process, and we're just getting the sort of the report now for the impact we've had. This first year was really about raising awareness, and that childcare is a great place to be, and what a big difference you're making to our youngest children. And you'll see some of the stats on there in the bottom right-hand corner. The presence we've been able to monitor across our social media has just gone off the scale. People are really looking at what we're doing. We've never had this kind of coverage before. And so, we're starting to tap in now to sharing information with and accessing people that wouldn't have been looking at information at all. So we can see those early signs there on social media. We also have enabled our early years providers to advertise on our schools recruitment platform. Previously, it was only available for schools, but early years providers could do it, but it was badged to be schools. So we've funded that. We've provided that as a free opportunity for our early years providers. And that's sort of helped us for a number of reasons, really. They've got someone they can advertise free. As part of our recruitment campaign, if people are interested in coming back to the sector, we've got that central repository of where jobs are advertised for them to go and look. But also we can see the kinds of jobs that are being advertised and the kind of jobs that maybe are not being filled, and think about what else we can do that's different for them to be able to fill those vacancies. So some really simple stuff. We could see some of the adverts our providers have put on. Other providers were attracting interest and some weren't. I think it's just around, it's how you present, isn't it? How you describe your offer. And as part of the promotional campaign, we've had a number of settings that we've worked really closely with that have been really successful in harnessing that interest and bringing people to come and work for them. So we've been able to sort of utilise that as well. And so we've extended that for a second year. And as part of this work, we've also realised that we do need to do more work to support our childminders, because it's a very different sector for them. It's changing. And so we've created a new work stream that is just coming online now, will be fully operational for next year of the childcare strategy work. And as part of the recruitment campaigns that we've done, we've tried to focus on people returning to the sector. We've tried to focus on school leavers. I can share you some of the video clips. It was just too big to put into this presentation, but one of the providers, they've been able to take school leavers on as apprentices. And there's a lovely story of George, actually, who's a setting in the south, who was a school leaver. He's gone in as an apprentice, and he's now the qualified Senko for the setting. So more males in the early years sector is something we're looking at doing, but also that positive career choice. So we've got lots of examples of bringing it to life for people as well, which really helps. We can move on to the next slide, please. So this is the early years Poppins bursary that Councillor Ball was mentioning earlier. And it's part of that recruitment campaign, it's part of that join up, across sort of portfolios and other areas. Really thinking about what we can do to make a difference. So 1.4 million has been invested by the council. And there's something that Poppins bursary is offering, and we're targeting this offer to areas where we know we've got a definite shortage, where we're looking for apprentices, where we're looking for we're looking at the whole age range as well to the sector. So the real promotion on sort of the more mature practitioner as well as the younger practitioner. So we've got that breadth of experience across the sector. So training programs started to be rolled out in September, and Councillor Ball, I think you've just seen a report that's literally just come through, hasn't it? So we'll be able to show you more information on how that's going and the number of participants. But you'll see there it's funded through the Levelling Up and as well as the ACL education budget as well. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this was the boot camp that Councillor Ball mentioned earlier, and this is about, for some people, they're not sure whether this is the right sector for them. And there's a range of opportunities as far as the boot camps, but a specific early years boot camp has been developed as well. And there's the opportunity for sort of somebody that's interested in the sector to experience the knowledge that they need, what working in the sector looks like, what the benefits are. And then we're working with our childcare providers around being able to guarantee on the learners on the boot camp the opportunities to have an interview with an early years provider or a school. We had examples of going into school. And the day nursery that was involved with us for the launch of the Poppins bursary, they've been really supportive. They've offered a number of several apprenticeship vacancies. And actually one of the first boot camp completers has secured an apprenticeship with them. So it's small, it's early, but we're starting to grow. We can then use these as case studies about why this is the way to go and how we want to take this further forward. I can just go on to the next slide, please. And then the next one. So this is just sort of going back to the childcare sufficiency picture that I was talking to you about earlier, and about just giving you that example about how we use the information that we've got, that assessment that we're constantly looking at, and how we can see whether where we've got the growth, where we've got the areas of concern. So this is broken down by the providers at the sector type, and So this is place-based. This first one is the number of places we've got at sector type. And you'll see there, we've got that comparison between, well, we started to gather this data in September 21. So you've got the comparisons there, and then we're comparing ourselves year on year as well. So in most areas, we are seeing improvement. And we've got a big growth in the wraparound care, but the after school club has a drop. But I think that's because of the childcare reforms, and we're badging this difference. Although it looks like it's a negative, I think we're capturing it under the wraparound care. So overall, it's a modest improvement, but it's an improvement nevertheless. It's a 2.2% overall from this summer term this year to the summer term last year. And if we can just move to the next slide. This is just the breakdown, so you can see at a district level the position of the, whether we sort of, we're growing the places we've got or whether we've got areas we need to be focusing on. And again, it's a growth overall, but we then need to sort of really drill down into those districts and think about what we need to be doing to improve. We're still a way off from where we were in 2021. We know that, but it's the growth, and the childcare reforms is really going to obviously help us with this as well. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. I've touched on some of this already. That annual assessment that we do, and then that monthly sort of like rolling place data I did to you, and how we use that to sort of generate the Section 106 funding. And I've talked to you about Chapel Hill and Linebrook Way being, they're our first two schools in Essex that we've got that's through early years right up to the end of primary phase, and where we're creating new schools. And we've got early years Section 106 funding as well. And if we've got a new school being built, it's mainstream school, it's likely that there's going to be early years funding. That's where the data would obviously work. That is the model. So, it's all together. It also gives us efficiency in construction costs because we're building them at the same time, and it all comes online together. Just that final bullet point on there, we've advertised, we've literally just advertised this week the next round of Section 106 funding. We've got 12 pots advertised across the county to the value of 5.7 million. And we're looking to create a minimum of 240 new places as a result of that. And these will be on top of the childcare reforms targets we've got. So it's a constant growth that we're looking at to meet all that additional need. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. There's a little bit more information on the charter. I think I've touched on quite a lot of this. We've talked about what the charter is for and how it's joined up. So this is something that we will be continuing to focus on. We haven't had quite the growth this year that we would have wanted to. Gone up 20 members from last year. The important thing is we've maintained that level of membership. But the team has been really stretched with the work, the childcare reforms, that's been full on for us. So I think they've done a good job actually maintaining those levels, but we do want to think next year about how we grow that. But it just gives us that great insight and it strengthens our relationships with the sector. We can move on to the next slide, please. So just some information on our Essex Early Years Climate Change Pact. We're really proud of this. And it's something that our charter members are really interested in. And some of the practice that we're seeing in our early years settings really sort of exemplary, really, and just really sort of makes you want to go back in an early years setting actually and work with children and some of the opportunities. And again, aren't they? Our youngest children are tomorrow's future. So actually, to be imparting all of this with our youngest children is really positive. So we launched it last year, but it was relaunched this year. We did a bit of a sort of a redesign, so it was more aligned to the wider across the council. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And just very quick headlines on this. So we launched it successfully last year. We've updated it. It was a real big focus at our early years conference in May this year, and we had workshops on it, which were oversubscribed. So I think it shows the level of interest from the sector. We can see the pact's been viewed that many times and downloaded that many times. So we're in the process of reaching out to the people that have downloaded the pact to understand how it's been used, so we can learn from that. And we also know other local authorities are really interested in this. We were in Suffolk a few weeks ago to talk about this work, so they're really interested in mirroring something very similar. And it's just, we're keeping it simple, you know, top tips and how people can engage with it. And just have the next slide, please. Thank you. And this is just the key message that we're giving, really. So it's sort of the mantra really for us as part of the climate pack. Okay, and moving on to the last slide. This is the final slide from me, but just wanted to summarise with you what our priorities for year 4 are. And we've still got a couple of months of this year to go, so there may be some slight modifications to this, but I think broadly these are going to be our overarching priorities. The childcare reforms continues. We really need to think about, you know, how we roll that out. We're also now starting to get more information on the new thinking that's coming out from the DfE and central government on what they want to see as part of the childcare reforms. And so there's a focus on a breakfast club for all, and they're looking at a pilot, and schools sort of registering an interest to sort of roll a pilot out from the summer term, and that being rolled out wider. And they're also looking at school-based early years provision. So we've got schools with empty classrooms, how they could be repurposed for earlier settings. So we're getting ourselves organised internally, think about what that means. The new approach is going to be that the DfE are going to be working directly with schools and early years settings rather than coming to the local authority. So we need to be very clued up and be ready with our childcare sufficiency assessment, so we could be imparting about whether there's a need, what's being planned, and also with our school's organisational team that there might be an empty classroom in a school now, but there could be some plans for how that space may be used in the coming years. So I can't give you more than that at the minute because we're still waiting for the guidance, but we are aware of it and we are starting to think about how we join ourselves up. Early identification, maintaining good level of development and recruitment and retention are going to be big ticket items for us still next year, not unsurprisingly. And then the other focus we're going to be having for year 4 is that more sort of formal evaluation of what we're doing. We are evaluating, we are measuring progress and impact. Our insight team there, they're going to really ramp up that support for us so we can then start to think as we go into year 5 of the strategy, what have we achieved, what do we want to do more of, and what would a subsequent strategy start to look like. So thank you. That's the last of our slides.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goodwin.
Kevin, thank you. You don't get bored, do you? I think boredom is a word in your vocabulary. Just on the childminder campaign, there was a couple of initiatives, one in October last year and one in January. In fact, they still had the previous cabinet member, Councillor Egan. The bursary has not really been publicised that much, as it would be an opportunity to relaunch that, because I think that's an excellent way to attract people in, you know. And the one suggestion I might have, Karen, it could be aware of, Henry Council ran this career track programme, which it's second to none. A good over a third of its employees have come through that, which are not just for young people, but also people that want to retrain things, you know. So they offer apprenticeship, you know, really good, solid programme. So that will be one thing that I'll put you in touch with the young messenger who runs that, you know. The skill boot camp, you know, from the ACL, that's another very interesting thing. What age do they have to be? It didn't stipulate what age people, you know, they have to be.
Sorry, it's like passing the boot camp.
Yeah.
And any working age?
Because I mean, that's another, you know, it's sounding like that childminding, you know, setting up as a childminder, it could be a really good way to tackle the deficiency that you've got there, you know, just making it attractive enough, really, you know. But and finally, just linked with, you know, with the previous thing that I meant to ask you then, the working families, is there an income, minimum income that they have to be classified as working families, you know, for the 45 to 30 hours?
Yeah, so it's minimum income of 16,140. I think I will confirm that's the completely accurate figure, up to a maximum of 100,000.
Okay, well, from 1,600, yeah. Combined, that's combined, isn't it?
In those of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So two so it's two parents, they both got to be meet the criteria. If it's a single parent, obviously just one of them.
Thank you, and well done for all you've put in place. It's absolute whirlwind of since you were here last. It's incredible. Thank you.
If I may jump, just on Councillor Guglielmi's points about the take up of the bursary, which is only launched in September,
Yeah.
and the boot camp, which is government funded. I think which again, both ACL doing. I've just recently seen the take up figures, which is I will share with the committee, and as to whether it's been.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, and my recollection is actually the take up has
I'll
been.
be very useful to the information. It's lovely. Thank you.
Councillor May.
Right, just to say thank you. It's a really nice presentation. And just a basic one, on the recruitment, did we not advertise that more with children in care? We've got, you know, we get children leaving care and you hear that they don't know about any career opportunities and things like that. That would be positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful. Yep, doing that up.
Okay, I can't see anybody else indicating, so you probably wowed them all with all the information.
No, well done, Karen.
So, well done for that. I'm sure you needed a glass of water or something. I don't know whether there's anything else you wanted to add to just round up at all.
Can I just add my thanks to Carolyn? I think the fact that from what I felt members have been engaged, I mean, always engaged, but you know, we all know we sit there sometimes and get on our phones and whatever, but the way Carolyn has set that out and delivered it, I'd just like to thank her from my point of view. I've seen it before, but I was still fully engaged with it. So I just wanted to book on record, and obviously with Shamson's support as well. And I think, again, the fact that perhaps answered a lot of questions in the slides, as there was a lot of them, maybe she does what a comprehensive job she did with this, but not only that, what a busy job she has as well.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So I think on behalf of all of us, I'd like to say a big
Thank you.
It's really interesting package, and continue the good work, really.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
To Val.
It's time. Thank you.
Cheers. We're ready to reconvene that. Well, I mean, actually, I think we might have a relatively short meeting today, which is always a good advantage. So matters arising, we've got a number of items that have been reported. I know because Jasmine's still getting to grips with all of this. I don't know whether you've got anything to say on any of that. Are those matters arising at all, or anything you need some information about to get you fully into it?
Sure, I am working on them all. There's been a couple that have come off since the last meeting because they were addressed at last meeting's business. And there are some that are going to be addressed in November's meeting and December's meeting. So I'll continue to work on those.
Okay. So, well, good luck. And the work programme, we're arranging a private briefing to discuss children's services. So I think we're trying to set a date for that coming up. And then we've got the November meeting, which we've got a little bit of a problem for. I was going to mention this. It's scheduled for the 14th of November. We've got a clash which we're trying to sort out at the moment, because otherwise I think well, got to be honest, we've got a Conservative group meeting, and the concern is that we won't be quorate if everybody's in the wrong room. So we need to try
And that's in the afternoon, isn't it?
yes, it was unusual that being in the afternoon anyway, but so I think we're going to have some discussions and see if we can resolve all that, and we'll send some proposed dates around to members to make sure everybody can get here and it fits with them. But whichever one gets moved. So, okay. So really, that's go to the next meeting. Well, I've just talked about that. Any urgent business? I don't think we've got any. And no exempt business. So on that basis, we'll close the meeting. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
What an interesting session this morning.
Very informative.